Our final passage of the 5 is 2 Peter 3:10 through 13. Now this passage is dominated by language of judgment and destruction, so it seems on the surface to contradict the idea of the renewal of all things. Yet there are two positive statements about salvation nestled among all the judgment language. The first is found in verse 10. But the day of the Lord will come like a thief. The heavens will pass away with a roar. The elements will be destroyed by fire, and the earth and its works will be found. Now, I've translated this verse quite literally. The Greek verb at the end of verse 10 clearly means to be found or discovered. However, those who know the King James Version might remember the translation is be burned up. Which is it? Will the earth be destroyed, burned up, incinerated at Christ's return? Or will the earth, after the cleansing judgment of fire, be found? Now, it turns out that burned up and found are not two different translations of one Greek verb. Rather, they're translating two different Greek verbs. The Greek manuscripts of the New Testament that were available 400 years ago, when the King James Version was translated, does indeed have the verb for burned up. However, since then, we've discovered many manuscripts of the New Testament that go back much further and are more original. And in all the oldest manuscripts, we have a different verb, meaning found. It looks like, and this is hypothesis, some scribe in the Middle Ages who was copying the text by hand, prior to the printing press, of course, couldn't understand how the earth could be found, given the widespread medieval assumption that the final destiny of the redeemed would be an immaterial heaven after the earth was destroyed. So he figured there must be a mistake here. Some other scribe previous to him must have made a copying error, and he was going to fix it by changing it back. After all, it was only the first part of the verb for found that's different from the verb for burned up. So this scribe changed heurethesotai to katakaesotai. And yet, in the first half of the 20th century, all English translations continue to have the verb for burned up in 2 Peter 3:10, even though scholars of the New Testament knew that the oldest texts had the verb for found. This is an example of the worldview of the translators causing them to ignore what the text actually said. Like that ancient scribe, they couldn't imagine eschatology without the destruction of the earth, with the righteous going to heaven to be with God. The NIV in the 1970s has the distinction of being the first English translation to buck the trend and translate verse 10 with the verb for found. The NIV says the earth will be laid bare. After the NIV, most English translations also have bucked the trend. So the ESV says the earth will be exposed. The NRSV says it will be disclosed. These are all ways to interpret what found means. So let's ask our two questions of 2 Peter 3:10. What is God's saving activity, and who or what gets saved? Here the saving activity of God is described as finding or uncovering or disclosing or laying bare, and the object or recipient of this activity is the earth. Technically, the earth and all its works. That's a reference to those human actions which are righteous and withstand judgment.